the last UFC event of 2020. Main event, Steven Wonderboy Thompson against Geoff Neal. A 5 rounder that went the whole 5 rounds. What do you think? What do we think? Wonderboy got the decision victory. It was an interesting fight. Wonderboy with a karate stance, using his distance, coming in and out. Geoff Neal with those powerful hands. Remember, he finished Mike Perry, who's hard to finish, and Wonderboy was able to do what he wanted. What was interesting about this fight was they were pretty friendly. Wonderboy and Geoff Neal, they constantly were giving each other dap, high fives. Good job. And it was interesting, even at one point in the fight, Wonderboy asked Geoff Neal, "Are you okay?" And it seemed more of a sparring match than the two trying to finish each other. Geoff Neal was trying to figure it out. And there was that accidental headbutt where they clash heads. You had Wonderboy in that southpaw stance against Geoff in the regular stance. And when those two styles come together, you can get that clash of heads, which opened up a cut on both of the fighters. Where does that put Wonderboy? I mean, it was an interesting fight. Geoff always had that. He always had that power to end the fight if needed, but Wonderboy just seemed to stay out of distance just enough time, just seemed to get away. And in that 5th round, Wonderboy had hurt his right leg, right above the knee. There was some swelling there. I don't think Geoff saw that to capitalize. I think if Geoff would have pushed forward, though, it would have been a little bit more interesting and go for broke. He had to know he was down 4 rounds to none, that he needed that finish. And I don't know that he had it to go ahead and go in there and try to finish Wonderboy, knowing that he needed that. Again, maybe if it was a little bit more bad blood, maybe that could have added some type of intrigue. But I think when two guys are really friendly, the other guy doesn't go for the kill as much as they would if there was a little bit something behind it. Wonderboy called out Jorge Masvidal after the fight. Also, wants to get back into that, or he's already in title contention talk. But for him to go from Geoff to Masvidal, or from Geoff to Usman, I don't really see that happening. Wonderboy's 38 years old. He's not getting any younger. And I think especially for this weight division, for welterweight division, that prime time seems to be around that 32, 33, or even between that 28 and 33 mark, right? If you look at the great welterweight fighters who had the title, whether it's GSP, Woodley had the belt for a little bit, Robbie Lawler didn't have it too long, but that seems to be the peak age where Usman is at right now. Wonderboy seems to be coming off of that. He's out of that, and I don't know how he'd fare against Usman's wrestling. He has great takedown defense, but Woodley eventually was able to take him down and was able to capitalize on that in both of their fights. So Wonderboy's still an exciting fighter, don't get me wrong. I think there's some fun things for him. I just don't see that next level of that title. It's not there. It's not in that reach. If Johnny Hendricks was the title holder, I think that would be a potential matchup that Wonderboy could win. Obviously, Hendricks is not in the UFC. I'm just saying if that was who had it in that style, where Hendricks did have that wrestling and he did have that power, but it wasn't the same type of pressure or power that, let's say, a Kamaru Usman or a Tyron Woodley would have. But it was still an entertaining fight. 5 rounds. And in the co-main event, there was Josie Aldo versus Chito Vera, which I thought it was going to be a little bit more closer. I mean, it was close going into the 3rd round. Jose took round 1. Chito was able to come in round 2. And then round 3, Jose was able to grab Chito Vera, take him to the ground, and just hold him. He ended up having him in a triangle lock. So it was just really difficult for Vera to get out of that. And he wasn't able to get out of it. He was frustrated. And he tried to get out of it a little bit too late. I think he went for broke the last 30 seconds. He knew he had to do something. He even tried to pick Jose up to bring him into his corner to get some instruction, but Josie was able to maintain that body lock on him. Wasn't really doing much damage. It looked like Chito was doing more damage swinging behind him, which was interesting. I didn't see that often where someone has their back and then someone's swinging and trying to punch them from behind, which you can't generate the same amount of power. But Josie was just content holding him there to the end of the round and was able to get a decision victory, which was pretty big for Aldo being able to come down to that 35 mark, especially he was a big 35er. I mean, he's big at 45. They were saying he potentially would go up to 55 to fight for the lightweight, but then after those losses to Max Holloway and those knockouts, he decided to come down, thinking that he could fare a little bit better. Against someone younger in that Chito Vera, what does it do for Jose? It still holds him up there in that title contention talk. You have Peter Yan, Aldo, the Funk Master, Sterling, right, is up there as well. And then what's Henry Cejudo going to do? Is he going to come back in 2021? I talked about maybe him and Volkanovski would be a kind of a cool matchup down the road in 2021. But a good victory for Jose Aldo, who doesn't have anything left to prove. I think there's not much for him to do as far as outside of the cage of what he wants to do. You don't see him as a commentarian, a broadcaster, or some maybe in Portuguese, but he hasn't really had that crossover. So he's just doing what he knows how to do, is fight. Two other fights I want to touch on is a Rob Font versus Marlon Moraes. That fight was interesting because Marlon Moraes came in from World Series of Fighting, the champ, and was on a streak. He was on a streak. It didn't seem like he was going to be beaten until he got the title and got derailed with his last fight, getting knocked out by Sanhagen. And then this time, it was interesting because Rob Font he's not known for that takedown and bringing him down. And I think that he wanted to stand up, and eventually he hurt Marlon Moraes, was able to get him in a bad position and get the fit in the TKO from the top. And what was interesting was Moraes when he was hurt, he kept on trying to get up, and he'd been working on his jiu-jitsu since his injury. So my only question for Moraes would be, if you were hurt, why not just stay down there, recover for a bit, right? Let Font come in, pull guard, hold them for a little bit, be able to come to your sense a little bit better, then work your way out. But every time Rob Font had him hurt, he would try to get up, get up. And Moraes did look decent. I mean, Rob Font was able to, he had him in some weird positions on the ground, and Rob Font was able to scramble, then put Moraes in some weird positions, and eventually able just to get it to the feet. So really big victory for Rob Font. Where does that put Marlon Moraes? Where does that put him at 135? I think now you're starting to be looked at as a little bit of a gatekeeper, where no one wants to be known as a gatekeeper. But for Moraes, who's still exciting, maybe he needs to not retire, but maybe he needs to recover a little bit more from his injury and really take a step back of okay, when this scenario happens, maybe I should do this. If this happens, because I think he could have been able to come back if he would have just let himself recover a little bit more on the ground, especially having that jiu-jitsu, being able to practice jiu-jitsu that much more with his following the ACL injury. And the last fight I want to talk about is Marcin Tabura versus Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy coming in, obviously he's very controversial, been through a lot. He gets flack. He has some fans. It's just where Greg Hardy is kind of a polarizing figure, not on a huge stage yet, but he's getting there. And really, Tabura was his biggest test. He had probably one big test before, and so this one though was Tabura was going to certainly see where Greg Hardy was at. Greg Hardy was able to do some good things in the first round. Tabura respected his power, kept him at a distance. And then I think when that he saw that he could take a shot from Greg Hardy, he started to move forward, and Tabura was able to, second round, push the pace. You saw Hardy started to get a little bit more tired, start to walk, to back up as Tabura moved forward with the kicks and punches, and eventually he was able to grab him, take him down, and then it seemed like Hardy didn't know what he was doing on the ground. I know has some good trainers, especially high-level black belts. Dean Thomas, being one of those, a really great jiu-jitsu practitioner and fighter, obviously in his own right. But when Tabura had him on the ground and was raining down blows, which were really not that hard, it wasn't that shots that were going to put him out. But Greg Hardy just started covering up and just taking the shots, and eventually just kind of looked like he was waiting for the ref to call it off, which ended up happening. And I wasn't sure what the methodology was in doing so. I didn't know if he could have turned to the side, try to push Tabura off of him to get back up to his feet. But I don't know if it was tired, if it was exhaustion. He's fought 3 times this year. And then, I mean, Tabura's fought, I believe it was his 4th time. So it just, what made Hardy just kind of curl up? And we haven't seen that from Hardy. Usually Hardy's the one doing the bullying. Usually he's the one that's pushing forward. Usually he's the one looking for the knockout. So that was interesting to see. I'm not sure where Greg Hardy goes. He still has that name. He still has the notoriety behind him because due to his past. So I don't think he's going anywhere. I just don't know if he'll be able to break into that upper echelon of heavyweights. Imagine him going against a Derek Lewis or a Francis Ngannou or even a Stipe. Any one of those guys of that caliber, he's not even close to that realm, especially with Tabura, who was able to have his way with him in the second round. Yes, he did have success in that first round, but for someone to just stay there, cover up, and not do anything, I mean, and just kind of wait for the ref, it was a really weird to see. I guess that's the best way to put it. Usually you see a fighter trying to work their way out and not let someone just finish them. I don't want to say he let Tabura finish him, but try to do something different other than covering up. I mean, if he was really hurt, okay, that's a different scenario. But outside of that, it was, I don't know where Greg Hardy goes. Again, he'll be a big name. Maybe you throw him in with the loser of Derek Lewis and Curtis Blades. That might be an interesting matchup, and it doesn't hurt Hardy if he loses to one of those guys. Then again, it does, and maybe it gets Lewis or Blades, whoever loses, somewhere else. I don't know, or maybe you put them in with Tabura. So there's a lot of good matchups to be made in the heavyweight division. Stipe recovering, getting ready for the Ngannou fight, and then John Jones. I mean, you insert John Jones into the heavyweight talk, and now the division just becomes that much bigger. Speaking of John Jones, this fight with Israel Adesanya, this is and the smack talk they have going back and forth. It's so interesting. I don't see how you cannot make that fight in 2021. I know Izzy's going to come up to fight the 205 champ, to fight Jan Blachowicz. I know Izzy's going to come up to fight Jan Blachowicz for the 205 title, and maybe John just makes his way back down and doesn't even take on a heavyweight fight and takes on that Izzy fight, because that thing is going to be huge. Those two have legit bad blood between them. It's reminiscent of DC and John Jones, but to me, it has a little bit more of a flair. Like, DC never took low blows to John. He talked smack to him, and yes, it was really made for a good matchups with DC. But Izzy, the things that he posts on social media and how far he's going in, I think it's become much more personal than the DC John Jones, which makes it much more interesting and intriguing at the same time. This thing was going to be huge, whether you have fans or whether you don't have fans. I think it's going to be bigger than a Conor McGregor versus Poirier fight. So that's always interesting to see. But overall, final UFC event of 2020, interesting event. They will be off for 3 weeks after going 21 weeks straight since July. So really interesting to see. And they're not coming back till January 16th. So that's what fans got to be treated to. And for the next few weeks, there's boxing. Ryan Garcia, I believe, is coming up in early January versus Luke Campbell. And then there's football and there's basketball starting. Go figure.